The new game Palworld is out, and it has taken the world by storm. While it has aspects of a survival, base building game, it also incorporates the best parts of Pokemon, with capturing, training, battling, and making them do forced labor. Yes, Palworld seems to have something for everyone, going beyond just what Pokemon has, even being marketed in many places as Pokemon with guns. But with that comes controversy. Nintendo is famous for mercilessly taking out games that are possibly stealing their IP, and many Pokemon fans are starting to raise red flags about Palworld. In this video, I'm going to take a dive into what I think, based on my limited knowledge of Palworld combined with my many years of playing Pokemon, and see if I can make a conclusion based off a tier list on similarities. Before continuing the video, I would like to mention that this video is not completely my original idea. I was browsing YouTube and I saw something with a similar title and I thought it was a great idea given the controversy. I've not watched it, but I'll link it below in case anybody wants to check it out. Now, I'll get onto the list. The first pal on the list is Pengullet, a pal with many similarities to the Pokemon Piplup. At first glance, there are a lot of similarities between the two of them. They both have a similar color scheme and they're both blue penguins. But it's hard to say that Palworld ripped off Pokemon, as there are literally blue penguins in the world. So in this regard, I would have to put Pengullet close to likely original, as it's based on a real world thing and not necessarily specific to Pokemon. I might change it on the list later based on how I view the other ones. But right now, yeah. If I think it's really similar to a real world thing, then it's hard to say that Pokemon owns the IP on that. And something like a blue penguin that exists in real life, I can't say that it's a ripoff. The second pal on the list is Jormuntide, a pal where at first glance many Pokemon fans might see it already as Garados. Both blue sea dragon kind of looking creatures. Garados, although is a water flying type, looks like a water dragon type, knows a lot of dragon type moves. And Jormuntide is literally a water dragon type. There are definitely similarities. One thing that I'm thinking of is that in mythology, sea snakes, sea dragons are an actual thing, which is what Gyarados is based on. And it also could be the idea behind Jormuntide. They seem very similar. I feel like there's more similarities between Jormuntide and Gyarados than there are between Pengullet and Piplup. But again, it's based on an already existing thing, based on mythology in the real world. It's hard to say Pokemon owns the IP on that. I think I have to put it in the same category as Pengullet here. Okay. It is a little less original than Pengullet, but I would still put it in the same category. And again, I might move this around later, but at the moment, that's where I'll leave it. On to the next one. This one, when I saw it being brought up online, I thought it was insane. This one right here. A pal called Mozarina. It's a cow. Well, I mean, it clearly is based off a cow. I see, like, they say the resemblance to Snorlax is that if you look at the teeth, Snorlax they both have the same resting eyes, smile, but Snorlax's teeth are pointed up, while Mozarina has the same teeth, but pointed down. I feel like that's a stretch. It's like sharp teeth aren't a Pokemon thing. One is clearly a cow. It's very different. Snorlax is just a sleepy dude. I don't think that this is a copy at all. So we're going to put this one in the original category. Okay, and then on to the next one, which I believe is Grintale. Yes. This one is the one that I've seen online the most out of all of them. And it kind of made, like, this by itself almost made me want to make this whole video. Because I don't know, it just seems so forced. Like, yes, the eyes are both yellow and it has grayish fur, and they're cats. But that's about where the similarities end. Like, the Grintale, not Grim, is on 4 legs, it's a cat, it's purple. I mean, like, just being different colors obviously doesn't mean that it's not copied. But, I mean, and different stances also doesn't mean that it's not copied. But they just seem like two very different things. They just seem similar because they're cats. And yes, maybe the yellow eyes, it could be. But, I don't know, a lot of people, I feel like, would put this on the rip-off tier, definite rip-off tier. But I can't put it much higher than 50-50, if not likely original. So I'm going to put it here for now. We'll see if I move it later on. And then on to the next one. Okay, I saw this image online, and while I agree, I do see similarities between Demud and Slowpoke. I saw more similarities between Demud and Clodsire, actually. They kind of have the same, like when Clodsire does certain moves, he opens his mouth. He has a very similar appearance to this as it's doing moves, both ground types. This one is definitely a lot higher than the other ones I've seen on the tier. This one I would actually possibly put in rip-off tier. Could just be a coincidence, of course. Like, obviously, Pokemon has so many different types of Pokemon that if anybody makes a creature, you can point similarities between them because, like, Pokemon can say, like, they have whatever. But I do see similarities here. I suppose I will put this in a likely rip-off tier. I think maybe later on I'll move it to a definite rip-off. We'll just see where everything else falls on the list. And then on to the next one. Okay, this is another one that I saw online that I didn't really like. Like some people saying you can't just make him stand up, give him a haircut, and be like, oh, that's a whole new thing. I don't know. It's a sheep. Let's be real here. Like, Pokemon didn't invent sheep. Just because there's a sheep Pokemon doesn't mean if there's a sheep pal that it's taken from Pokemon. This is like the same idea as Pengullet and the Jormuntide from earlier, that there's a real thing in the real world, so I can't just give it to Pokemon here, and I will be putting it in the likely original tier. And I'm coming to find that the likely original tier basically just means real world tier. And the original tier just, well, I mean, the original tier also, like a cow, is in the real world. Okay, as you can see, I made a change to the list. I made a whole different category. If it is something that's very similar to the real world, I obviously can't say that it's a ripoff of Pokemon, so it's in a tier that's technically original. It's just not Pokemon IP, therefore not ripped off. Some of these I might move up to original as the video goes on. As I've been saying, I'll move things as the video goes on. We'll just see how it goes, and then we'll make a conclusion at the end. This next one is, I mean, I get what some fans are saying, that, oh yeah, they have the same kind of egg-shaped round body, but like, at first glance, the only similarity here, to me at least, is the trident on the forehead. And, well, I mean, the Empoleon's trident isn't even on the forehead, it's like across the whole face. I don't know, like tridents aren't original to Pokemon. These are very clearly different things. And as far as evidence goes, I don't know. This is really poor evidence in my opinion. So I'm going to be putting this in the original tier because I just don't think that they're the same thing, or remotely similar for that matter. The next one here is Univolt. And immediately, I do see the similarities to Zebstrika. They are, I mean, the similarities come from them both being zebras. I mean, I can't say that everything that looks for like an animal isn't necessarily Pokemon IP. Like, if Pokemon changes an animal's appearance enough, then I suppose that makes it their own original idea. In this case, yeah, I can see it. It's like a electric lightning zebra is a little specific to Pokemon, and maybe coincidental. I mean, in a way, like thinking about just a developer standpoint in general, when you're trying to make an original idea, if you're basing it off a real thing and you have elements in the game, yeah, it makes sense. You can do like water zebra, electric zebra in this case, grass zebra, whatever. And then it'll also line up with Pokemon developers when they're relating it to a real world thing and they have their own element typing that they combine with. So, so there's a lot of these in here where they're both basing it off of the same thing, and it's not necessarily that Palworld's basing it off of Pokemon. I think this one is closer to a ripoff than some of the other ones in terms of just it being an electric zebra. They changed the colors, but it's further from being a zebra than it is to being a Zebstrika, if that makes sense. So, in terms of tier list, I would put it close to Demud on the tier list. So, I think I would put it up here in likely ripoff. This next one is Robinquill, which has is very close to Decidueye, I think is the name. They're both kind of like this archer bird. They have the same color scheme. They both have a cape. I mean, the fact that it's called Robinquill, I haven't seen this pal in the actual game yet, but I'm assuming that it's related to bows, like how Decidueye is related to an archer. This one is a lot clearer of a resemblance than anything else. Yeah, you can say there's archers in the real world, but this is just so similar. It's a same cape, same bird kind of thing, archer. Yeah, so this is the first thing that I will put in a definite ripoff tier. Next, we have Toco Toco, which is similar to Xatu. They're both this Native American designed bird looking creature. I mean, like, just right off the bat, I think I might also have to put this on ripoff tier as, I mean, yeah, the idea of doing a Native American style bird is likely from Pokemon. I mean, obviously in Native American cultures and things like that, there might be, well, okay. In Native American cultures, there might be some reverence for birds. I would have to do some research into this. Admittedly, I don't know much about it, but I feel like it could be based on a real thing. Like in Native American tribes, they have had things similar to Xatu that Xatu's based on, that Toco Toco is based on, instead of it being based directly off Xatu. But from my very limited knowledge on the topic and immediate thought, it does seem a bit like a ripoff. So I will put it in the likely ripoff tier. I think it could be higher. I'll have to do some research onto that. It could definitely be in the ripoff tier, in the completely. Okay. The next one is Sparkit, which is a electrical mouse Pokemon, which is the Pokedex description of Pikachu. So I understand why, if you see an electrical mouse, there is an immediate connection to Pikachu. But I feel like, as I stated for the Zebra Strike one, I forget, I'm blanking on his name, that because the developers are basing it off an animal and an element, that you're going to have actual combinations of real elements and real creatures, and then that creates an electric mouse, which is in Pokemon, and in this game doesn't necessarily mean that the Palworld one is from Pokemon. I do think that the inspiration for having electric types, well, not necessarily just electric types, but maybe specifically having electric mouse in this case, could be based on the popularity of Pikachu. There isn't a lot of marketing around Sparkit. I feel like it's not meant to be a direct ripoff, but I do see similarities. So I'll put it in the likely original tier, as it's an electrical mouse, as the developers are trying to make an electrical mouse, but it does bear resemblance. Not necessarily directly, but in the fact that it is an electrical mouse. And our next one is Anubis, which this is one of the ones, looking at it, that I thought, yeah, I see the similarities. I mean, obviously, Anubis is based on the Egyptian god, but, I mean, it just has the same body type as Lucario, and just having the same body type doesn't necessarily mean it's the same, but Lucario has a very distinctive body type, and Anubis just follows it very closely. The same shade of blue, the black and blue, a little bit of yellow. I can get behind this being an actual ripoff. I will put this in the definite ripoff tier. Okay, and I think we're about halfway through. The next one. The next one is another one that I've seen a lot. It's this Grisbolt one, where it's very similar to Electabuzz, and people say it has the same stance as Zangoose. I see that it has the same stance, but it's also the same. It's like if anybody's just standing up with their arms by their side, yeah, that's okay. They're copying the Zangoose stance to them. So, but the immediate connection between Electabuzz and Grisbolt is pretty clear. Yeah, it's a lot closer than the electric mouse Pikachu thing from earlier, the Sparkit Pikachu similarity. I feel like I can definitely see where Grisbolt is coming from if you look at an Electabuzz. And I think I'm going to have to put this in the likely to definite ripoff tier. Like Toco Toco, I think it's higher in the likely ripoff tier than some of these other ones. Higher than Toco Toco, because as I said for Toco Toco, I don't know a lot about Native American history, and if that's more what it's based on than necessarily just Xatu. Next, there's Elizabee, which is similar to Vespiquen. They are both, well, let's see. A chosen queen to rule over bee guards. Yeah, I mean, it's a queen bee Pokemon. Well, I mean, the fact that I said it's a queen bee Pokemon, I immediately went to the idea of it being a Pokemon. I mean, queen bees are a real thing, but they don't look like this, and it does bear a lot of resemblance to Vespiquen. I think this one is very likely a ripoff. Yes, I understand that there are differences in the fact that Vespiquen is literally a honeycomb for a body versus what looks more like a dress, but just the body type, queen bee kind of pal Pokemon, I would put it in the... I'm calling it definite ripoff. I mean very likely ripoff. It's not necessarily enough evidence to say that Palworld's stealing the IP. Next, this Astegon, I believe it's pronounced, which has a very similar body type to Mega Aggron. Yeah, it does seem like a black Mega Aggron with blue talons and wings. Or at least the face seems kind of like it. The idea, the helmet with the horn coming off of it, and it kind of comes down right at the front with the chin being a sharp point. Yeah, I definitely see similarities there. And then the armored body. But the armored body, like pretty much most armored bodies are kind of going to look like that, so that's not necessarily definitive. But the shape of the head, I can definitely see similarities. Okay, I feel like the main point that I made in this one is that the helmet shape for Astegon is similar to the Mega Aggron, but also they're trying to make an intimidating helmet that's spiky, goes around the head. I feel like it doesn't necessarily mean it's based on Aggron. I feel like you can point to a lot of Pokemon with different types of helmets. Like, as I've said before, Pokemon has so many different types of Pokemon that you can make basically any creature and point to similarities between Pokemon and that. But this one does have pretty strong similarities in terms of visuals, so I'll put it, I think, in the likely ripoff, pretty high, past Toco Toco. I don't know if higher than the Electabuzz pal. So far, this is actually shaping up in a different way than I was expecting, because as I was just looking through them casually, I felt like I saw a lot more that I was like, oh, these are just based on actual animals. You can't say that it's based on Pokemon. But as I'm making this list, I have put more in the likely ripoff tier than I expected. But again, I don't think that's indicative and means that Palworld ripped it off. There's just similarities. The next one is Incineram, where immediately, again, I do see the similarity here that people are pointing to. It has the same kind of stance, same color scheme, same dark typing as Zoroark. Zoroark? Yeah, it seems like they put a white mane. They don't have the hair, but they have horns. Yeah, just immediately this seems very close to Zoroark. I'll put it slightly ahead of Univolt and below Demud, because I see the similarity between Demud and Clodsire a little bit stronger than this one. Next on the list, we have Orserk. I saw some people talking about this one. I don't really see it. I mean, yeah, it kind of has a little bit of a shark face, which is what Garchomp is based on. Similar stance, I see that. and kind of similar body types, but not really when you think about it. Like, the Orserk comes out more, has larger arms, thicker legs, and yeah, I guess, again, different body proportions doesn't necessarily mean it's not ripped off, but I'm having a harder time seeing the similarities between this and Garchomp versus some of the other ones that we've seen so far. I think it's, I would say, likely original. I feel like the argument can definitely be made for it being a ripoff, and if somebody told me it's a ripoff, I could possibly get behind it. But at the moment, I see it a little bit closer to original than what people are saying. Next, we have Dire Howl, which I think, well, in my opinion, we're going back to the idea of there being actual animals, being wolves, that this is based on, and not necessarily Lycanroc. Dire Howl looks more like a real-world wolf than it looks to Lycanroc. I feel like wolves in the real world are usually more monochromatic, but I think that's just them trying to make Dire Howl not like an actual wolf. I would put this in the category of real-world type thing. Let me organize this bottom category to be more in order of how I actually feel about these. I rearranged the categories a little bit so that the further right it is, the less like Pokemon it is. So like how the cow-looking fella here is not like Snorlax at all, in my opinion. Besides the face, maybe, but definitely not a ripoff. While the further left in the category is closer to Pokemon, but still in this category. It's just the most like the ones above, if that makes sense. All right, on to the next one. This one is Fenglope, which there is a staunch similarity to Cobalion. The white mane, the horns, the blue coloring, it kind of has the wind aspect behind it. Just immediately, I think I can put this in the high ripoff tier. Less so than Robinquill, but more than Elizabee. I think around Anubis level, maybe just a little bit ahead of it. So I think I'll put it right there. We have Jetragon, which is a play on dragon. Yeah, so I don't... Okay, so I kind of see the similarities between Latios and Latios, because Latios and Latios are based on jets. And Jetragon is based on a jet, obviously based on the name. But, I mean, just the fact that it's based on a jet doesn't mean it's a stolen idea from Pokemon. I mean, I think just even just looking at color schemes and looking at what the Pokemon is, I feel like it looks closer to a Salamence. Maybe it's just because I'm looking at pretty much just the color schemes here. But I feel like it's closer to Salamence than it is to Latios and Latios. And therefore, I don't really see the similarities here. In fact, Latios and Latios don't even look that much like jets to me. I feel like it's based more on the real-world jet than it is based on Latios and Latios. So I will put it in the original tier. Next we have Broncherry, which is similar to the Pokemon Meganium, I believe, the evolved form of Chikorita. I do see the similarities. It is, well, it's a grass-type Pokemon with the idea of the head coming out of a big flower. It's green. I think Meganium is, well, Meganium's based on the real-world flower and those big herbivore dinosaurs, I'm pretty sure. And Broncherry seems to be taking the same inspiration. I do feel like that the Pokemon idea of Meganium was original enough that it's not just a real world thing, and Broncherry does bear a lot of similarities in the flower herbivore dinosaur respect, and therefore I will put it in high likely ripoff. I think even possibly, yeah, in the highest possible ripoff tier. The next one is one that I definitely saw right away. It's Wixen, which seems to be inspired by Delphox, as it's a fox. It's a fire fox looking Pokemon that has magical attributes. The wizard hat on the head, like Delphox is holding the torch in the Pokemon games, but it very clearly has the magical aspects of it. I believe this image here isn't the actual Delphox. This is a fan-made alternative design. Yeah, I see the similarities. I mean, when it's put side by side with the fan image, obviously it looks a lot more similar. Compared to the real Delphox, it's a little bit different, but the idea is still the same, of kind of a magical fire fox, and therefore I would put it pretty high on the ripoff tier. I think even up here. Next up, we have one of the most talked about ones, and this is Cremis, which is said to look a lot like Eevee, where I definitely see the similarities. When I first looked at it, I actually didn't really think there were a lot of similarities. Like, they were kind of cat-like Pokemon with a big mane. This is a Mega Eevee, which looks more like Cremis than the actual Eevee, but at first, I thought it was just kind of a cotton ball cat and not really like Eevee, but the more I look at it, the more similarities I do see. I don't think it's as damning of evidence as people are saying. I think it's a little bit lower than some of the other things that we've seen so far, but the more I look at it, the more I see similarities. At first, like as I was saying, I thought it was kind of like Cottony, but I think I'll have to put this pretty high on the list. I think, yeah, I would put it below Broncherry, but I still, honestly, no, I would put it even lower. I'm thinking I would put it below the Electabuzz looking pal. Alright, next on the list, I believe there are just a few more, is Dinossom, which first of all, I love the name. I think the name Dinossom is better than Lilligant. I think the Broncherry Meganium earlier was a lot closer than the Dinossom Lilligant here. I mean, yeah, you got a green thing with a flower on the head, but I mean, Dinossom's a dinosaur, and just putting a flower on the head. And okay, I also now see that it's a flower with a crown kind of looking thing, which Dinossom does have. But I feel like just having a flower on the head with a little stem coming out doesn't necessarily point to Lilligant. Okay, well, okay. Looking at it even longer, I see that the flower kind of curves upwards and crown stem. Even with that, like it being a very similar flower, I think that the flower could possibly be taken. There's some similarities there. I think the rest of it is different enough that you can tell that it's definitely a different creature. So I think that's enough to put it in the likely original tier with some similarities just in the flower. I'm definitely not going to pronounce this one correctly. Azurobe, like Azurobe, which looks like Primarina. Primarina is based on a mermaid, and you can definitely see similarities between it and Azurobe. Azurobe does seem to be trying to have that kind of serpent-like mermaid appearance. I suppose Primarina is more like a seal than a serpent, but body shape-wise, they are similar, just with Azurobe not having arms. I think it's similar. I think it's different enough, but just like first glance at it, I did see similarities. So I think it's kind of in a similar boat to the one before, where I will put it in the likely original tier as it bears similarities, but it's definitely different enough that you can claim that they're different. For the final one, we have Verdash, which has similarities to Cinderace. In terms of, well, the stance in this image is different, but Cinderace in battle is a very energetic kind of fighting Pokemon, which I believe takes that stance. The head shape, face structure is very similar. Body structure is similar. Coloring's different. They're different typing, but just at a glance, you can definitely see the similarities between the two of these. I believe people are saying it also takes a little bit of inspiration from Leafeon and Hisuian Arcanine in the mane and the leaves, which I see. I think they are very similar, and I would have to put them pretty high in in the likely ripoff tier, but not actually that high. Like, I think Demud is a very likely ripoff of Clodsire, and I've mentioned it multiple times throughout the video that, and I think this isn't more obvious than Demud, but I think it is still pretty clear. So, yeah. Anyways, this is the list I've made so far, and I must say, I am very surprised. I thought I was going to go into this and be like, yeah, it's marketed as Pokemon with guns, but it's really different than Pokemon. The Pokemon have a lot of similarities in term. I call them Pokemon. The Pals have a lot of similarities, well, with Pokemon, in terms of appearance. I still, despite making this list, and I suppose if you're just looking at this without knowing anything about the two games, you would say, oh, okay, it seems like a ripoff. I would still say that it's a point that I made, I believe, twice in this video, that a lot of developers, when trying to think of creative ideas, are basing a lot of things on real world animals, objects, things like that. And obviously Pokemon took inspiration from real life. Palworld took inspiration from real life, probably took some inspiration from Pokemon and created these things. And obviously, again, as I've said in the video, there's so many different Pokemon that you can create a lot of different creatures and still bear similarities to Pokemon. So even though this list seems so leaning towards there being a lot of ripoffs, I think that Palworld is so creatively different than Pokemon that it can't really be sued by Nintendo. And yeah, it definitely feels, well, it definitely feels like its own game. That's going to be the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, maybe a follow. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next one.